Hey, what's going on everybody? I hope y'all are all doing well. I'm Anthony. On today's video, we're going to talk all about pine resin. More specifically, we're going to focus on the medicinal aspect of it. And as a bonus, I'm going to show you how you can make your very own pine resin salve. So stay tuned. That's right, today we're going to be talking all about pine resin, but the medicinal side of it. And when I usually mention pine resin or usually think with pine, the first thing people think about in the self-reliance, off-grid, survival community is going to be pine pitch glue, because most people usually think about is pine pitch glue because it is very good at sealing two things together or sealing tents, that kind of stuff. It's very good adhesive. I mean, I would think about it too. But this is the medicinal side of it because pines in my area are a abundant resource. And as my friend Maccabeus over at Maccabeus Outdoor Survival always says, everything's a resource. So I wanted to get people to think about things besides just like lumber usage. And there are other uses that we've been using as a people here in the Southeast for hundreds of years. And one of those main uses is medicinal. I'm sure a lot of y'all have heard of pine tar. If you've watched my video about 2 years ago, I posted a video on how to actually make pine tar, and I hit briefly the medicinal sides of it. And if you know anything about turpentine, turpentine is also made from pine trees. It's actually the distilled sap or resin. So they've been using these products for, like I said, centuries. They've been using pine forests that they plant just to make turpentine. And well, since turpentine has started to slowly go out of favor, pine tar has been going out of favor. People are kind of losing their, I don't want to say their way, but they're losing kind of the whole process and why we're doing this thing medicinally using a resource that is abundant. If I can get anything through with this video, it's going to be trying to explain that this is a very good resource. Just because you see it every day does not mean that it is not worth it. Trust me, it is worth it. So we're going to focus on pine resin and the medicinal sides of it. Now, this isn't going to be in some sort of like role of importance, or I'm not going to try to put these in order anyway, but the first thing that comes to mind when I mention the medicinal sides of pine resin is going to be the fact that it is antimicrobial. This is a very good antimicrobial because it does not allow microbes to reproduce. So if you have an issue, especially on your skin topically, you can use pine resin to stop the reproduction of microbes. Now, another plus is it's great at conditioning the skin. It actually keeps moisture in, so if you have a wound, it can help it heal better and faster. So not only are you going to be stopping microbes from reproducing, but you're also going to be sealing that wound and keeping a lot of that moisture inside so your body can repair itself. So that is one of the things that you can use as a twofer if you use like a fresh pine sap and you put it on, say, a wound right here. Not only is it going to dry and harden and keep that wound nice and moisturized, but it's also going to kill microbes that might be in there. Now, pine resin has something called an oleo resin inside of it that is also very good at getting or improving circulation. So if you have things, especially in your hands, say you have arthritis, issues with arthritis, you can rub some of this stuff on your hands and it will actually improve the circulation. It will improve that warmth feeling. So if you're somebody who has poor circulation in your extremities, especially your hands or your feet, you can use this stuff to help increase that circulation, to maybe take away some of the pain from arthritis. Pine is also really good for your respiratory tract. It's very good at getting rid of phlegm, and it's an expectorant. So if you have something like a pine needle tea, which is made from the pine needles, but it's got the resins in the needles, then you could inhale that, put your head over like the hot steam and drink it, and it'll help get that stuff out of your lung. And finally, much like comfrey and plantain, pine resin is also a puller, meaning it can help draw things out from in your skin. So if you have, let's say, a splinter, whether it be wood or metal, you can use a pine resin on that affected area and it will help draw out that foreign invader in your body. If you work in cars like me, that you might be grinding on something or drilling into something and you accidentally wipe your hand over and you have metal shards in your fingertips, which happens quite often, it drives me insane. You can use this stuff to help draw those metal slivers out of your fingers so you're not constantly in pain every time you touch something. Okay, so now that I've told you all the cool stuff and all the good things about the medicinal aspects of it, I want to explain how you can actually use it to your benefit. Now, there are 3 preparations that I personally like myself. Number 1 is going to be obviously pine needle tea. This comes with like a vitamin C thing. Everybody talks about making pine needle tea because it's good for vitamin C if you're, especially in the wintertime, but you got to use brand new pine needles, okay? The new ones. You can't use the ones that have been on the tree for a year and a half because they fall after 2 years. So you want to use the ones that are nice and green and bright and the fresh ones to make a pine needle tea. It's really good vitamins, and it's got the resins in there that will help you if you breathe it in. If you breathe it in during hot water, it'll help you get that mucus out of your lungs. Secondly, one of the easiest ways is what I was talking about earlier, is where you can take fresh sap and put it over a wound, because again, it's going to kill the microbes that are in there, or at least keep them from reproducing, and it's going to be able to waterproof the area, so you're not having to worry about moisture leaking out, and you're not having to worry about other things leaking in. So it's a good temporary solution, so you can maybe get home to a better situation, or maybe get to a hospital, something like that. So don't knock that one, because it's probably one of the easiest ways to use this stuff. And finally, you can prepare pine resin into things like salves, balms, butters, or even a liniment. Okay, a whole bunch of different medical terms that I'm sure a lot of y'all are probably like, what does that mean? Well, just going to focus on the top two. Number one is going to be a salve, and number two is going to be a liniment. A salve is basically an oil-based thing, like, you know, when you would see like, you know, most chapsticks or lip treatments are a form of a salve. Okay, all you do is just put it on your lips, letting your lips absorb it, and it's healing them by doing so. So that's kind of the whole point of it. And a liniment is a alcohol solution, so you're going to soak it in alcohol, and using the alcohol to draw all the properties of it. That way you can apply it somewhere, and the alcohol is going to basically dry it up pretty quickly, but you're still going to have that chemical constituent on whatever affected part of your body that you're going to put it on. Alright, so now the time that everybody's probably been waiting for, we are going to go ahead and start making our pine resin salve. But first things first, we have to get a good source of pine resin, so let's go in the woods and see how much we can collect. Okay, so first things first, we're going to have to find a good source of pine resin. This is a tree that I cut about 2 or 3 months ago, and as you can see, the sap has ran upwards as the tree has fallen, especially with these cold, hot cycles of the early winter we've had so far. And but it's not a really good source of sap, because you see it's only this much, and I mean, you're gonna get a good powdered form, but there's not gonna be big chunks of it. Here's another tree that I cut. As you can see, the sap is really only running right around the bark. It's not in the middle yet. And again, it is just a very small source. So what I like to do is I like to make big wounds in trees where I take an axe and I cut big V-notches, because you can see here, after about 2 or 3 months, there's big giant chunks of sap. Now that's what I call having a lot of pine resin. I can add it to my jar. Now we're going to take what we got and we're going to weigh it. Okay, first things first, we have to zero out the scale using a similar jar, and then we will see how much we have. We have right around 105 grams worth. Okay, so now it is time to melt our resin. First things first, we got to get a double boiler system set up, because we don't want to put a jar directly on the bottom. I ultimately ended up changing this because I didn't have enough jar in the water, so I ended up building a nice little spacer with a piece of foil, which I've done for years, and it works out just fine, just as long as that glass isn't sitting on the bottom. Now, as you boil it, you're going to start seeing that resin melt, and then you're going to have to, while it's doing that, you're going to have to weigh out your carrier oil. Okay, I like to do a 1-to-3 ratio, meaning 1 part resin to 3 parts of the oil. So if I got 100 grams of resin, then I'm going to want to have at least 300 grams of oil. And as you can see here, I took it out and the resin is starting to melt nicely, but it's going to melt very, very slow. So what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to pour at least half that oil in first. That way that the resin will melt, mixing with the oil as it's melting, okay? Because that's the whole thing. We're trying to get it to dissolve into the oil, because the resin is oil soluble. So if we can do that, if we can get the oil to carry that resin, then that's what we're looking for. So as you can see here, you have, once I stir it, you have all that resin at the bottom, and it slowly starts to incorporate into the oil. It's dissolving into the oil. You see how it is? Now, as you can see, there's a whole bunch of pieces of bark. That's what we're trying to avoid. So we're going to try to get all that resin dissolved while keeping the bark floating. So after about an hour, hour and a half, you're going to see that your resin has incorporated fully with the oil. What you're looking for, as you can see here, is a nice cloudy looking oil, and when you stir it with, say, your chopstick, spoon, whatever you happen to use, all you see left is bark. Okay, pieces of bark, pieces of wood, that right there at the bottom, that is basically what's left over of the resin. So we want to strain that out. We don't want that stuff to be in our final mixture, so I have a cheap Dollar Tree strainer with some cheesecloth to make sure that none of those bits of bark get into my oil. So we're going to pour it through, and once we get everything situated, we are going to want to have our remaining bark, so we can wrap it up in the cheesecloth and squeeze it. All right, I want you to get all the oil and resin you possibly can out of there, because we're not trying to waste anything. We just did all that work for a reason. So then you're going to take the rest of your oil, the ones that didn't fit in the original jar, and you are going to add it to that carrier oil. Okay, so now we're going to get the scale back out, and we are going to see exactly how much we lost in translation from the resin and all the bark and whatnot, because we did have a nice little chunk of bark in there. So it should be somewhere around 400 if we had 100 and 300, and we are at 386. So we really only lost about 15 grams in all that pine bark. So now we're going to make sure we divide that, do a little bit of math. We're going to divide that 386 number by 6 because I'm doing a 1:6 ratio of beeswax so we can solidify that oil, and that's going to leave me about 65 grams, which is right here. So 65 grams is going to be what's going to add to our carrier oil so we can solidify it and make it into a salve. All right, so we're going to take that beeswax and we're going to add it directly to that carrier oil. Now all we want to do is stir and wait until it dissolves and melts so it can be nicely incorporated. And as you can see, after about 20 minutes, 25 minutes, everything is mixed together like it's supposed to, and we are just about ready to pour. Okay, so everybody's favorite part. We're going to start filling up our tins. If you don't know where to get these tins, check down below in the description. I'll show you where I got them on Amazon. There's a reason why I put it in this Pyrex, because it makes it easy to pour. If you leave it in a jar or something like that, it's going to leave it very difficult to pour. Since the Pyrex has a nice little spout, it makes it so much easier, trust me. So if you have a Pyrex, something that you can buy, this is like an off-brand that you can get from Walmart for like $8, then use that because it's going to make things so much easier and neater, all right? As you can see, you just pour everything in like you're supposed to, kind of get everything to the same level. Took about 10 tins, and give it about 20-25 minutes, and it's going to solidify looking just like that. Now, it's still warm. It won't fall out, but it's still warm. So if you break that top layer, it's going to basically sink in. So you want to make sure it's completely cooled down. So what I want you to do is I want you to cover them up, because when you cover them up, it allows them to cool a little bit slower. That way they don't crack. So that's all you're going to do is going to put the cap back on and let it sit for another half hour to an hour. After about 45 minutes, we're going to check to see if it works. And as you can see here, boom. It's just the consistency that I want, something that's spreadable. I'm not going to use too much, and we are going to go ahead and try it out on my palm, all right? Perfect. That's exactly what I want in a salve. Okay, so just to recap, because I know I threw a lot of those numbers out really quickly in the video, but I wanted to go ahead and recap those numbers that we're going to have to keep going and rewinding over and over again to get those numbers. So we started at 105 grams of pine resin, which I rounded down back to 100 grams. And then I added a 3-to-1 ratio, so 3 parts oil to 1 part resin, so I had to get 300 grams of olive oil. I combined half the beginning so I could get everything incorporated because resin dissolves in oil. When I got all that together, I sifted it, or I strained it through cheesecloth and a strainer to get all those pieces of bark out. When I did that, I took my final weight, which was 386 grams, meaning I lost about 15 grams of my resin weight in bark and things like that. So I took that into account for my final measurement, which was 385 grams divided by 6, because we are doing 6 parts of that infused oil to 1 part beeswax, because beeswax is what's going to make that oil a little bit more solid into a salve form. So that's why I did that. And if you divide it by 6, you're going to get about 65 grams worth. So I used 65 grams of beeswax to 385 grams of the infused oil, and that's what gave me my final product. So here is, again, that final product. This is one of those things that holds very well, it stores very well. That's why I like making them so much. I made like 10 tins, so I'm going to probably give away some of these for Christmas. Some of the people who may want this, I'm going to give it away to them because they realize how important salves are to keeping your skin healthy. One of the main reasons why I like it is because for me, I don't know about y'all, but when it gets cold outside, like winter time, my skin gets very brittle because I'm one of those people that has like a obsessive compulsive need to wash my hands all the time. So when I do that, and especially in the wintertime, my hands dry out. When they dry out, they crack. See? So like I get calluses and stuff, yeah, but my hands start cracking, and it gets very painful, especially when it's around like 30, 32 degrees. Like this morning it was 30 degrees, and it's very painful walking the dog this morning. So if I can put something on my skin to help protect it and heal it, then that's what I'm going to do, and that's why I made this stuff. Yes, there are other things that I could put on here. You can buy products all day, but if you can't buy that stuff and you have to make something of your own, this is a very good alternative to be able to fix issues like this. Alrighty, I think I'm hit a stopping point. I think I'm going to wrap everything up. One thing I want to make sure I mention before I go is I'm not a doctor. I'm not your doctor, so don't try to hold me accountable as a medical professional, because this is strictly some guy on YouTube telling you about something that works for me. So if you want to emulate it, by all means, you're an adult, you can absolutely do so. But if you learned anything at all from this video, please do me a humongous favor and give this video a thumbs up. Share it with somebody who you think might appreciate it. Subscribe to the channel if you are not, and I will catch y'all in the next one. All right, bye. Oh, and one more thing before I go, I just want to make sure that I go ahead and address something that I'm probably going to get it down in the comments. Why are you killing this tree? The tree was healthy. No, as you can see right here, it was not healthy. There's a big gash here. This tree is sick. It's dying. That's why I gashed it in the first place, because I'm going to cut it down. I'm just waiting for the wind to stop going so I can finally cut it. But yes, this tree has been marked to be cut so I can stop shading out my crabapple. So yes, if someone's complaining about this tree being damaged, don't worry. It's going to get cut down anyway, so sorry.